Hey everybody, Steven here, and today looking at the performance of the Dead Space Remake on the Steam Deck versus the AOK ZOE A1. So I have all the information up here, so we are running both of these at 800p. This first one is auto graphic settings, and then I have the FSR 2.0 set to performance across the board for all of these. Now with this, I don't know that I'm going to talk the whole time, but I do want to explain a handful of different things. This does have the latest drivers on both devices, and with this they did release an update, and I'm going to put a link for Vicarious Nick's video where he actually talks about, he did a video before they did the update where it was horrible performance, and then Steam actually updated the game and now it's been running smooth. But it didn't just apply to the deck, it actually helped with the AOK ZOE A1 as well. And so that was really cool to see just how quick they were able to do that. Now, looking at the hardware and stuff like that, this is just different hardware. In terms of the A1, when I did my review, I said it was about 30%, 20 to 30% better than the Steam Deck for most games. What I've noticed is certain games where Steam has really pushed hard and they've done stuff on their end, there's just games that run really smooth on the deck compared to anything else. And I think this is a really good example of that. You're going to see across the board, the deck is performing better than even the AOK ZOE A1 here, which does have just better hardware in it. And that is a huge testament to Steam, to Valve, and what they're doing with the deck. In terms of the software and just the updates that they do, there's just something where games can just run extremely smooth on this, even though it isn't the latest and greatest in terms of hardware. Now, looking at this, we have the average FPS. With the A1 right now, we have 43. With the deck, we have 49. The range that we're seeing with this is 26 to 60 on the A1, and then on the deck, we have 38 to 60. Keep in mind, this is a bigger screen on the A1 as well. So we're looking at an 8-inch screen versus the 7-inch that you're finding on the deck. But the A1 has the more powerful hardware with the 6800U and just the internal AGPU on that. I do want to point out also that these are running the game where it is installed on the internal SSD. It is not on a micro SD card or anything like that. So this is just this running with the internal SSD. Now here in the next week or so, I will have a video just showcasing the performance on the A1. And with that, I will show something else that it offers that the deck doesn't have, which is an increase in resolution. So I've run the game at 1080p and it's actually handled it decently. I've tried it at 1200p, and that's really where, even with the better hardware, it just can't keep up with this game, but I will showcase some of that. I also do want to mention I'll have it at the very end, and I'll just show it on the A1. The game obviously is going to look much better in person, and right now the light, just because I wanted everybody to be able to see the fact that these are running on the A1 and the Steam Deck, I have a little bit of light with this. I will showcase this with no light on so you can see it does look better if you're in a dark room. Obviously it's a dark, scary game, and so right now you're just seeing more of a glare. It almost looks like it's kind of drowned out with the brightness here, but that really has more to do with my camera. Moving on though, we have the next setting here. So this is going to be the low graphic setting. And with this, for the A1, in terms of the average FPS, we had 42. For the FPS range, it was 25 to 59. And then on the deck, the average FPS was 50, and the FPS range was 39 to 60. I do wish the deck had the ability to increase the performance metric numbers there. I chose the one at the top just because it is a little bit easier to see. And then with the A1, I'm just running the MSI Afterburner, which is just easier to see. And like I said, I just wish you could scale that a little bit better with the deck. So my apologies that you can't really see it too well, but regardless, with my numbers here, I've combed through all the footage to make sure that I had the correct numbers, and then I did the range and then the average here. I will talk about it when we get to the medium settings. There is a stuttering issue that did cause some adjustments to the numbers, but I'm going to disregard that and talk about kind of why I disregarded that. But one other thing I did want to cover, and I should have done this earlier, but the TDP, the power draw here, the A1, I am running this at the full 28 watts that can output. The Steam Deck, I have it set to auto and it is running at the 15 watts with this. So there is a difference in power here. And so bigger screen on the A1, and yes, it's going to have a performance hit. But again, you're looking at how good the software is and what Steam does with the deck that is different to other handhelds, where they just get really good performance out of that thing, even with the lower TDP. And again, the A1 is running at 28. It's almost double that of the Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck is still hitting higher FPS with that. So I'm going to go ahead and let this roll out now, and then I will jump back in when we get to the medium graphic settings. All right, so now we are on the medium settings here, and I want you to pay attention to the deck on the bottom, because as I click over and I start this movement, there's just something that happens when you change the settings. We're gonna see a stutter here, and I noticed that this really happens more with the deck than it does the A1, but it's just this temporary, and it was like a blip. It was probably hard to see. It's more noticeable on high, and then I believe ultra as well. But it's just this momentary blip that happens in certain areas where it just really tanks the FPS. So I did not average that into this. I am going to give you the numbers, but let's cover what I actually averaged here first. So the average FPS is 38 for the A1, with the FPS range being 24 to 52. For the deck, the average FPS was 47, with the FPS range being 33 to 60. Now, if I was to include that tank where it dropped down, it actually went down to 26 FPS when I had that micro stutter. And so if I used that average, it would actually be 43 for the average, so a little bit closer to the A1. There was one instance where I saw it on the A1. I've seen other when I've been playing on my own, but I've just noticed it happens more on the deck. Not 100% sure what that's about, and it may be something that Valve can actually fix via an update, right? Or maybe if they're doing updates with the game, the devs can do something about that. But it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Again, I notice it more when you're changing graphical settings. Every now and then I just notice it when you're changing rooms. It kind of seems like is the time you end up seeing it more. Sometimes there may be something where, yeah, you're fighting a creature and I don't know what it is with that. That's pretty rare. But again, it's changing, and maybe it has something to do with how they're actually streaming the game in. It's just creating some type of micro stutter really quick. Few and far between, and it's not something to me that I think is going to ruin the experience for everybody, but it just does happen, unfortunately. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and let this play out, and then I will jump back in when we get to the high settings. All right, moving on to high settings now. Again, if we pay attention to the deck, you are going to see that drop and potentially that stutter right here where I'm going through this door and you're kind of transitioning to this next part here, right there. And so again, I've just noticed it kind of happens in those areas, and sometimes it's right after you change graphical settings. Sometimes it's literally just you're moving from one area to another. But let's look at the average FPS here. On the A1, it is 38. The FPS range is 23 to 52. For the deck, the average FPS is 44. The FPS range is 28 to 60. Now, with that 28 to 60, what was interesting is with the stutter, even including that, the stutter was 29 to 60. It wasn't the 28. So the 28 I actually noticed further down the road. So that was something that kind of threw me off a little bit, where usually I see that stutter, it actually tanks lower than any of the other settings, and we'll see that when we get to Ultra. But with this, it really didn't have an impact on that. But regardless, you do notice the fact that it had a stutter, and that's not something that I think everybody obviously wants to see when they're playing a game. But as I mentioned, few and far between, but they're still there. And the A1 is still running smooth with this, although it is showing lower FPS than the deck. All right, I'm gonna let this thing play through, and then I will hop back in when we get to the Ultra settings. All right, we are on the Ultra settings here, and this was interesting because now we're going to see a stutter on the A1. So there's a stutter with the A1 and with the deck here. Same kind of area that we're seeing right here, which makes me think that maybe it is one of those issues where the game is streaming in, whatever it may be, and it's just causing a stutter because we're seeing it on both of these devices. Looking at the average FPS with the A1, it is 42. The FPS range is 26 to 58. So if you've been following the pattern here, we actually started at 43 on auto. At low, we were 41, medium 38, high 38, and then for Ultra, we're at 42. So we kind of took a dip and then went back up. And actually, before I get over to that, I do want to include, and this was separate, with that stutter, it was 21 to 58, so it was technically 40 average FPS if I include that stutter where you do see it basically tanks the FPS there. Moving to the deck though, average FPS is 45, the FPS range is 30 to 60. With that, the stutter actually was 19, so the stutter dropped that all the way down to 19. So if I'm using that, the FPS average is 40, so it's actually lower than the A1 if I don't include the stutter, or it matches it if I actually include the stutter here. So interesting to see the deck, because it goes 49 for the auto, 44 for the low, 47 for the medium, 44 for the high, and then 45 for the ultra. Again, not including the stutter with those numbers there. So it's like kind of like a little bit of a dip goes up, a little bit of a dip goes up. We look at the A1 and it's just like a general kind of going down, and then at the very end we hit ultra and then it goes up. So you could actually use ultra settings on both of these devices, still get really good FPS that is pretty close to the auto here. What I notice is the drops may be a little bit more extreme, because again, I'm taking an average, so I'm looking at the highest FPS that I see on this and then the lowest, and then I'm averaging the two. But if you're watching these videos, you're consistently seeing that, hey, on ultra these are showcasing lower FPS that are kind of holding to that. I'm just doing the average through a calculation versus trying to average it and let the software see like, oh, you hit this number more often than any of the other ones. So with this, yes, it's showcasing that the average may be higher with me averaging them. But if you watch the video, it is a little bit lower on ultra compared to obviously auto or low. I would say your best bet is to run this in auto and just leave it there. It does really good. If you're using the FSR 2.0 and you're setting it to performance, I think this performs really well considering this game just came out. I think it looks great as well. Now I'm gonna let this part finish out here, but let's actually showcase what this looks like in a completely dark room so we can see that as well. All right, so switching over now to 1920 by 1080p with this, doing auto for the graphical settings and leaving the FSR 2.0 set to performance. This was very interesting here because I actually got a better average FPS with this, with the higher resolution, than I did with the 800p. So the highest we got with 800p was 43 for the average on the FPS. I also didn't get the stutter on this particular area right here. But with 800p, we had the highest average at 43. Here, the average FPS was 48. The FPS range was 35 to 60. Same thing with the other video, and I saw it more on the deck, which was it going over 60. So the panel is just on both of these, it's just 60 hertz. But with this, it went to 61 at one point, and on the deck, the highest I saw out of all the video was 63. So I'm not including that because again, the panel itself is just 60 hertz. But I thought it was pretty interesting that this actually hit 60. So there we go, we just saw it right there, 61. But again, capping it at the 60, the highest average with 1080p, not 800p. And this visually looks better. Notice the difference in the MSI Afterburner. And so looking at just the specs that we have up in the left-hand corner, you can see that that is now shrunk compared to the other video, and that's because of the higher resolution. So I do like that as well, where it's not as big and intrusive once I do increase the resolution. I thought it was gonna struggle here, and this is the area where all of them we start to see the drop, and you still see the drop. But it's not massive. I'm actually really impressed with the A1 in this regard. So I'm very curious to see once I start doing more comparison between 800p and then 1080p, and I will showcase the 1200p as well in the A1 specific video. I'm curious to see just the range of results that I'm going to get with this hardware. So it's performing better at 1080p. I think it looks a lot better at 1080p obviously than it does at 800p. You get a lot of smoothing out of everything. So I've mentioned this before, essentially you use anti-aliasing in video games, but as you increase the resolution, you need less and less of that because the resolution is kind of doing it itself. So this, it played smooth and it looks great. I do want to mention that there is one area here my camera started to struggle, so it gets blurry here in a second. So nothing to do with the game, it's just my camera. But I did also want to showcase just this looks better when you're playing in a dark room. And this doesn't quite nail it down. It still looks obviously better in person, but this does look better than when I had the lights on with the rest of the video. So that's actually going to wrap this video up. I hope this has shed light on the performance between the deck and the A1 for the Dead Space remake here. If you have any questions on anything, let me know in the comment section. If there's anything specific that you want to see as well when I do the A1 video, in terms of the graphical settings or anything like that, let me know in the comment section and I will collect all of those and I'll make sure that I cover that in that final video. So that's going to be it for this one, everybody. If you like the video, hit the like button for me. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.